How powerful men crush disrespect. Machiavelli's way, disrespect is not just an emotional insult, it is a philosophical event. It is a signal, a test, and a turning point. Every time someone disrespects you, something deeper than your ego reacts. It's not just that they ignored your presence or spoke over you or laughed behind your back. It's that they challenged your place in the order of things. In that moment, whether consciously or not, they asked the question, are you a force to be reckoned with, or are you forgettable? And that's why the way powerful men respond to disrespect isn't about revenge, but it's about restoring the balance of power. And no one understood this better than Machiavelli. Niccolo Machiavelli wasn't giving advice to weak men trying to feel strong. He was giving strategies to men who were already ambitious but who needed clarity, precision, courage, and ruthless wisdom to survive in a world where appearance often matters more than reality. He knew that disrespect, if left unchecked, doesn't just wound your pride, it erodes your entire foundation. Because in human psychology, the moment someone senses they can get away with belittling you, the rest follow. People don't just observe how you react, they learn from it. They recalibrate their respect for you based on your response. And if your response is silence, avoidance, or appeasement, you've already lost. Not in one moment, but in every moment that follows.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
So Machiavelli, who had seen empires rise and fall based on perception, wrote something deceptively simple. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But what does this mean when it comes to disrespect? It means this: when someone crosses the line, your goal is not to destroy them. Your goal is to make it unthinkable that they would do it again. You don't need to shout. You don't need to fight. But you must signal strength so clearly that the entire environment shifts. That's the Machiavellian way, strategic dominance, not emotional reaction. And that's step one, understanding that disrespect is a public act, even if it happens in private. It's a ripple in the social order. And if you don't respond with command, the message that spreads is this: you're safe to challenge. That's why powerful men treat disrespect not as a personal offense, but as a systemic flaw that must be corrected. Think of a leader in a room. If someone undermines him and he laughs it off thinking he's being the bigger man, he may win admiration from the polite, but he loses respect from the observant. Because people instinctively follow strength, not virtue. You must ask yourself, do I want to be liked or followed? This doesn't mean being cruel. It means being deliberate. When someone crosses you, you don't lash out. You calculate. You assess. What's their motive? Are they testing you? Are they insecure? Are they trying to climb over you? Once you understand that, you craft a response that doesn't just address them, it sends a signal to everyone watching. You might cut them off mid-sentence with cold clarity. You might correct them publicly with facts, not fury. You might isolate them socially, not with drama, but with silence. However you do it, you make one thing clear: there are consequences for disrespecting you. And once that becomes known, the social order readjusts in your favor. But this leads to a deeper philosophical question: why does disrespect affect us so much? Why does it feel existential, even when it's subtle? The answer lies in Machiavelli's core insight. Human beings are always engaged in a silent negotiation of power. Every interaction, every look, every joke, Every gesture is part of a larger game. And the people who succeed are not those who avoid conflict, but those who understand the game without losing their soul. Disrespect is not random, it is information. It reveals who feels threatened by you, who wants to rise, who's testing your boundaries. And if you ignore that data, you're not being wise, you're being blind. Powerful men don't ignore disrespect. But more importantly, they don't react to it either. They respond. And that's the key difference. Reaction is emotional. Response is calculated. But when you respond, you're not just preserving your pride, you're protecting your position. And Machiavelli would tell you, the position you hold in people's minds is more important than the money in your account or the title on your resume. Because your perceived power determines your actual influence. Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone disrespected you and you said nothing? Not because you were calm, but because you were afraid, or unsure, or didn't want to create tension. What did that silence cost you? What message did it send to others? And how would your life be different if, in that moment, you had responded not with rage, but with unmistakable strength? That's the Machiavellian choice. Not brutality, not cruelty, but strategic assertion, maintaining the image of strength at all times, especially when tested. Because in this world, people don't give power to those who are fair. They give power to those who look like they already have it. The calculated strike, when, where, and how powerful men respond to disrespect. There's a misconception that power is about constant dominance, about reacting to every challenge with force, about always being on the offensive. But Machiavelli knew better. True power isn't loud. It's precise. It's not about responding to every slight, it's about knowing exactly when to respond, how to respond, and where it will have the greatest impact. The powerful man doesn't go to war over every insult. He waits, he watches, and then he strikes not emotionally, but strategically. Because what matters is not just punishing disrespect, but using it as a tool to consolidate your position in the minds of everyone watching. Think about it this way. Every act of disrespect is a test. But not every test deserves a response. Some are too small, too desperate, too irrelevant. And if you overreact to those, you look insecure. You reveal that you're easily triggered, easily manipulated. And Machiavelli would say that's a weakness your enemies will exploit endlessly. But the truly powerful man understands the difference between a jab and a genuine threat. He understands that some slights are beneath him. And by ignoring them or subtly reversing them, he elevates himself. He sends a message, I am untouchable. I don't respond to noise. I choose my battles. But when the challenge is real, when the disrespect threatens your role, your reputation, or your future, that's when the strike becomes necessary. And here's where Machiavellian wisdom shines. He teaches us that the timing of your response is everything. You don't react immediately. You let the disrespect breathe. You let the offender believe they've succeeded. And then, when they don't expect it, you correct the imbalance. You create a moment, a scene, a gesture that not only neutralizes the offender but elevates you in the eyes of everyone else. That's how powerful men move, with control, not chaos. Let's break it down practically. Suppose someone tries to embarrass you in front of others. Maybe they make a subtle joke at your expense. You don't flinch. You don't laugh nervously. You hold your ground. Maybe you say nothing, but you look at them in a way that says, "That was noted." Or maybe you respond not with anger, but with a sharper joke, one that hits deeper, but still wears a smile. And the moment passes, but the message lands, "I saw you. I let that one go, but don't try it again." That's not ego. That's psychological positioning. Or let's say someone consistently undermines you in meetings, questions your ideas, interrupts you. But you don't interrupt back. You wait. You gather data. And then, at the right moment, you call it out plainly once. You say, "I've noticed a pattern where you interject before I finish. Let's allow the full idea to land before we debate it." Calm, unapologetic, final. That's a calculated strike. It doesn't just address the behavior, it reframes the room. It reasserts your authority without theatrics. And people remember moments like that. They adjust their behavior around it. But here's the philosophical core. Machiavelli isn't telling you to become cold. He's telling you to be in control of your fire. Because uncontrolled emotion is what lesser men fall into. Powerful men channel it. They don't destroy indiscriminately. They punish with purpose. That's why their actions carry weight. Because they're rare. Because they're intentional. And because when they move, everyone feels it. Ask yourself this: how many times have you exploded over something minor only to regret it later? And how many times have you stayed silent when you should have stood your ground? What if you could replace both with something better, a third path of deliberate dominance, where you respond only when it matters, and when you do, it's unforgettable? That's what Machiavelli offers. A blueprint for power based not on chaos, but on order. Not on fear alone, but on respect earned through restraint. Because when you strike only when necessary, and when you strike with precision, you don't just crush disrespect. You prevent it from ever returning. The silent signal, why the most powerful response is often the one you don't see. There's a level of power so refined, so elevated, that it no longer needs to announce itself. It doesn't shout, threaten, or even respond with obvious action. It simply exists in such a controlled, deliberate state that others instinctively adjust their behavior in its presence. Machiavelli understood this principle better than most. He recognized that the most enduring, most fearsome kind of authority doesn't always come from visible displays of dominance. It comes from invisible influence. A kind of unspoken aura, a silent signal that says, "I am not the one to test," not because you said it, but because you never needed to. This is where most men get it wrong. They think crushing disrespect means confrontation. They believe power means always being seen, always being heard, always being the loudest voice in the room. But what they miss is that true dominance doesn't need to prove itself. It's self-evident. It's in your posture, your silence, your unwillingness to engage in petty battles. But when people sense you don't flinch, don't chase, don't need validation, that's when they begin to calculate differently. They begin to respect you preemptively. And that respect turns into caution. That caution turns into influence. And that influence becomes control. Machiavelli would say, the best fortress is to be found in the love of the people. But if love cannot be secured, then fear, when applied wisely, is enough. But what if you could generate both, not through words or threats, but through presence. That is the silent signal. It's not about being feared in the traditional sense. It's about becoming untouchable through a kind of psychological gravity, but people simply don't want to risk misstepping with you. They'd rather align, rather defer, and not because you're intimidating, but because you're impenetrable. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine someone tries to take credit for your work, a subtle move, a disrespectful one. Many would respond by confronting the person directly, maybe even arguing in front of others. But the powerful man doesn't need to fight for air. He simply lets the truth make its way back, because he's already positioned himself so strongly that everyone knows where the credit belongs. Maybe it's how you carry yourself. Maybe it's the way you speak, measured, slow, with intention. Maybe it's the relationships you've built, the quiet authority you've cultivated over time. So when someone tries to steal from your name, they fail not because you retaliated, but because you've already made yourself undeniable. There's a deep philosophical lesson here. It's about detachment. The more you need to respond, the more power you give away. The more you chase respect, the more it slips from your fingers. But the more you embody strength, the more it magnetizes others to you. That's why the silent signal is so effective. It doesn't demand attention, it commands it. And when you master this, disrespect becomes rare, not because people suddenly become kinder, but because they perceive the cost of testing you as too high. Ask yourself this: what kind of energy do you send into a room before you speak? What does your silence communicate? Are you the kind of man whose quiet makes people curious or makes them comfortable enough to challenge you? That's the difference. The silent signal isn't just about withholding response. It's about projecting presence. It's about making your very existence a recalibration of the social hierarchy. And here's the paradox. The more you work on mastering yourself, your reactions, your emotions, your need to prove anything, the more power you gain over others. Not because you're trying to control them, but because they sense that you are already in control. That's the Machiavellian ideal: to be so composed, so centered, that others orbit around you without even knowing why. So the next time you're disrespected, ask yourself not just how you should respond, but whether you even need to. Consider whether your silence could say more than your words, whether your calm could shake the room more than your rage. Because sometimes the most devastating response is the one they never see coming. The final move, how to turn disrespect into long-term power. Disrespect is not just a moment. It's an opportunity, a trigger, a crossroads where a man either loses control of the narrative or rewrites it entirely. Machiavelli didn't view disrespect as something to be merely crushed. He saw it as a chance to reshape the dynamics of power for the long term. Because every insult, every challenge, every moment someone underestimates you, it contains within it the seed of transformation. If you respond wisely, that moment of disrespect becomes the event that cements your authority, redefines your presence, and elevates your reputation beyond what it was before. But here's the catch: transformation requires vision. You can't just react to disrespect like a wounded animal. You must treat it like a chess move. You must see 10 steps ahead. Ask yourself, what does this moment reveal about the system I'm in? Okay, about the people I'm surrounded by, about the weaknesses I've allowed others to perceive. Disrespect often exposes structural vulnerabilities. Maybe you've been too accessible, too forgiving, too self-deprecating. Maybe you've allowed your image to become soft, your boundaries too flexible. And when someone finally crosses the line, it's not random, it's a reflection of the system you've tolerated. This is what Machiavelli would call the diagnostic power of conflict. Disrespect, when viewed correctly, becomes data. And if you use that data wisely, you can rebuild your foundation stronger than before. But only if you resist the temptation to act emotionally. The final move, the true consolidation of power, requires strategy over ego. But it's not about humiliating the offender. It's about turning the entire situation into your advantage. Let's say someone publicly disrespects you, interrupts you in meetings, mocks your ideas, spreads doubt behind your back. The average man might retaliate. The insecure man might shrink. But the powerful man, he plays the long game. He isolates the offender not through aggression, but through excellence. He becomes so composed, so unshakably competent, that the disrespect collapses under its own weight. He wins allies not by complaining, but by rising. Because in the long game, results speak louder than rebuttals. Then, at the right moment, he makes a move, not to punish but to reposition. Maybe it's a public success that proves the doubters wrong. Maybe it's a subtle restructuring that sidelines the offender. Maybe it's a private conversation that ends with a line so sharp, so clear, it echoes in the offender's mind for days. I let you speak. Now watch me move. And that moment, that's the pivot. That's when the disrespect becomes legend, not because it broke you, but because it revealed you. Machiavelli would say, a wise ruler must not rely on luck, but must craft his own fortune through foresight and force. Disrespect is the moment where you are forced to do both. You must see clearly what led to this, who is watching, what's at stake. And then you must act decisively, not wildly, but with purpose. Because when you respond with clarity and precision, you don't just crush the insult, you recode your identity in the minds of everyone around you. Let me ask you this. What's your philosophy when someone disrespects you? Do you seek to hurt them? To defend yourself? Or do you use it to restructure the room? Because that's the difference between the average man and the powerful one. The average man chases validation. The powerful man controls the narrative. And once you learn to do that, to take the raw energy of disrespect and refine it into strategic action, you become unshakable. The final move is not about revenge. It's about elevation. It's about turning weakness into warning, doubt into dominance, and insult into inevitability. Machiavelli didn't teach us how to be feared for fear's sake. He taught us how to be respected without question. And the ultimate way to do that is simple: turn every test into a transformation. Because once you master that, no one dares to test you twice.